Welcome to the Happy Disruptors podcast. If you're a creative thinker with an unconventional approach to your industry, you just might be a happy disruptor. Join your friends at the Great Outdoors Foundation for honest conversations about tackling critical issues like conservation with an uncritical disposition. If you like to smile and get things done, this is the podcast for you.
Hello, and welcome back to the Happy Disruptors podcast. I'm Katie, and today and for the rest of December, we are going to be doing something a little bit different than our typical episode format. As you may already know, we launched the Happy Disruptors podcast in celebration of our 30th anniversary this year in June. And we've been really fortunate to have a number of amazing guests on throughout this first season. So we decided it would be a great way to wrap the year with a series we're going to call Best of 2025. And so for the next 4 weeks, we're going to be dialing in on one specific topic and featuring some of our expert guests in clips from throughout this first season of the Happy Disruptors podcast. So you'll hear from Hannah as well as some of our other partners who are able to contribute their relevant experience and provide perspective from their lens on that particular issue. So today's episode is going to be all about water quality. And we could have never anticipated the circumstances that we would be launching the Happy Disruptors podcast into during the summer of 2025. And obviously, for our listeners in Central Iowa, you know that this rose to a major level of awareness through a set of circumstances between an irrigation ban from our local utility, a multi-year report that compiled hundreds and hundreds of studies on our source water here in Central Iowa. And then just in general, water is front of mind because of the recreation component that comes along with the summer. So very excited to have you listen in on these folks who were able to provide insight in that timely manner this summer, as well as some of our fall episodes. And just a reminder, each of these guests has a full-length episode. We would encourage you to go back and listen to their individual episodes to get a deeper dive. And remember, Hannah and I are not water quality experts, so don't take our word for it. Really listen into the folks who have their expertise in this particular area. And ask questions, be a critical thinker, get curious about the issue. We would encourage you to share this episode with someone who maybe could learn from the folks who are featured and just engage with the content in a way that is beneficial to you and to your community.
But water quality as a whole, conservation as a whole, is very nuanced. And there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of what would seem to be contradictory science unless you really, dive into it. And so when you look at that, how can you have nuanced conversations with your neighbors about water quality? How can you come to have more success in water quality if we don't have a common way to speak about it? And so I'm hoping one of the things that we can do with the Happy Disruptors podcast is really to take deep dives into some of those topics, break it down so that everyone can understand it, and really start to build a vocabulary and a level of understanding that we can have more productive conversations.
So water quality has been in the news a lot lately. What are some key takeaways that you want to emphasize as a longtime researcher and what we would consider a water quality expert?
Well, thanks. Well, I want to start with the non-scientific stuff.
Yeah.
I think I'm just impressed by the amount of interest this year, right? I mean, I have done my work in the shadows for a really long time, and the small group of people have been really interested for a long time, but everyone seems to be asking questions now, wondering what's in their water, how to test it, what to do, and so we're just having this moment, and there's a lot of emotion associated with it. People are scared, people have strong opinions about what should be done. I'm glad we're having the conversation. I think this is how it should be all the time, right?
Yeah.
Not the emotion part, but the discussion. What can we do better? You know, what have we done? Letting people know what's actually happening, because we're still catching up on all the information right now. It feels like, so people, you know, are still learning what is nitrate, right?
Yeah. Yes.
What does E. coli mean? You know, how do these standards come about? So there's just a lot of catching up to do. And with that, there's a lot of misinformation out there. And, I shouldn't be shocked, but I am, just everywhere all the time. And so it's cool to get to talk about it, maybe fix some of those misunderstandings along the way.
Why do you think that there is more interest? Why do you think this spike in nitrates has caused more of a conversation than before? Because we were talking before. This has happened before.
It has happened before. And in fact, it was happening 20 years ago when I started at the DNR, right? The people who were retiring when I came along were talking about how difficult these issues are to solve, and how maybe they hadn't gotten as far in their career as they thought they would, right? So it's been around for a long time, and my students are in their 20s, maybe. And so it's always been like this for them, but I tell them it hasn't, there was a time when this wasn't an issue. But to answer your question, Hannah, I think we're at a moment where everything is just bigger and more topsy-turvy. Governmentally, economically, socially, we're just in these like big change.
Yeah.
And I think that can be an opportunity. I'm an endless optimist. I'm surrounded by pessimists, and they will laugh at me. But I think it's an opportunity to think about doing things differently.
Yeah, it's definitely changed a lot having, kind of the real world experience now in water quality. I would say one of the biggest things I learned, and I kind of alluded to it already, is water really kind of acts like that canary in the coal mine. Like water quality, or water as it runs through our system or our environment, can really tell a lot about what's going on in the environment. So I like to equate it a lot to blood work in humans. Like we look at our blood and we get our blood tested and we see what the results are. And that can tell us a lot about how our organs are functioning, or how different aspects of our bodies are working together to make us healthy. I think water is very similar in the environment, and I have seen that now. And so working through it and looking what is the nitrate levels, for example, or what are the chloride levels, can tell a lot about what's going on the actual landscape itself. So is our soil health really good and it can hold those nutrients, or is it leaching a lot of those nutrients and the soil health isn't actually that good? So I think just really realizing that water quality and testing it really can give us an indicator of, again, that more holistic perspective about what's going on in the environment. I think one other thing that I definitely learned a lot more, especially being in working in Polk County, such a heavy urban environment, is education and knowledge is, I think, lacking a lot more than we think. And so it's getting better with more stuff in the news and more people seeing and reading things. But I really think just a general knowledge about water quality is lacking. And then even more so, what people can do about it. Yeah. So we all can play a part in water quality. And I just don't really think people always know what they can do. So I have learned that, honestly, the education aspect is as important, if not more important, than actually doing the work to improve water quality.
Interesting.
Educating those on what they can do, because I work on public lands. We own 16,000 acres here in Polk County, but that's a drop in the bucket compared to what everyone else can do on their own properties. Everyone owns a little property or plays a role in society that they can influence water quality, and they do on a daily basis. So I think educating them on what they can do, maybe little things like, don't mow your grass clippings into the street, like that can play a big role into water quality. Or that when water does go down storm drains, it doesn't get treated. It goes right to our creeks and streams and rivers. So a lot of people don't know that, surprisingly. And then I think youth as well, a lot of our kids, instilling that importance of water quality, instilling ways they can live their life that really shape how water quality will be in our future. My perspective has completely changed on that, just how important education is in general, to improve water quality and not just the practices that we can put on the landscape.
Absolutely. Well, and you're getting at the stacked benefits too of some of these conservation practices. I mean, you mentioned wildlife, just this holistic picture of the ecology. I think that is such a interesting side effect of, again, back to your analogy of the waterways being the blood. If the health of one system gets better, the health of the entire system is going to improve, which I think is really interesting.
Right. And Right. And water quality, that's what it's going to take to improve water quality. We can't really improve the water quality by just working in the stream. We can't just work there with the water. We have to do things on the landscape in order to improve water quality. That's how we're going to get to those improvements. And so it really does take that more broader look of the whole watershed. I like how, Hannah, you mentioned the watershed approach, because I think looking at the whole watershed is important, because, you can do everything you want right there, do stream restoration, really get some trees growing over the stream. And yes, that's going to improve stream health. But ultimately, to improve water quality, you're going to have to look at the whole watershed and hopefully try to make some big changes on the landscape in order to influence water quality and really make a difference, I guess, with that.
One thing we can spend a little bit of time on is this transitioning, right? Because in the interim, until we have a diversification of crops, until, we have widespread policy change, either at the federal or state level, what do we do in the interim? And I think that is why we started, a couple of years ago, the Conservation Acceleration Fund. I don't know, Hannah, if you want to talk a little bit about that and how it relates to the Farm Bill that Pat already mentioned.
It's one of the creative funding mechanisms I give you guys so much praise for. I think it's really a smart strategy to get rolling, and it will allow for some level of transition. So tell us more.
Well, first, I think there's a general overview of it's not just one thing. When we talk about our water quality, it's going to take a bunch of different groups doing a bunch of different things that have big impacts. But, about 3 years ago, the Great Outdoors Foundation, you might have even been chair at this point, we were talking about how can we get more involved in water quality. And as we were talking to some of our partners up and downstream, we started hearing some similar things. So instead of assuming that we knew everything, we hired a group out of Fort Dodge, Iowa that had close relationships, were trusted advisors to different elements of the ag industry. And we went and had coffees, one-on-one coffees with over 100 people, everything from boots on the ground and producers and landowners, all the way up to C-suite ag industry levels, leaders. And we asked them all the same question. Are you satisfied with Iowa's water quality? Are you satisfied with Iowa's approach to water quality? And then a series of other questions about what's working, what's not. 100% of the people that we talked to said that they were not satisfied with Iowa's water quality nor Iowa's approach, which gave us a way to come in and be partners in a way that would be proactive, could be collaborative. And we really found that there was some issues with funding, consistent funding, but also a lot of times when you go for some of these federal grants to implement conservation, you have to have this local match. And it can be significant. And especially in rural Iowa, they were never able to necessarily get the local match that would make them competitive on a federal level. And then in addition, our state and federal partners like Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, they had restrictions on what they could or could not spend money on. And so oftentimes you would have funding for a large project and a high impact one, but maybe be missing 100,000 or, $1 million out of a $25 million project. And so that's where we launched the Conservation Acceleration Fund. And we started to get private investors to provide that gap financing. And it has been fantastic. We've been able to definitely accelerate the pace of some of these large impact projects. We've been able to target them into specific areas that would have a bigger impact on the water quality downstream. But now what we're really focused in on, besides just just those projects is how can we start doing administrative rule changes and things that change conservation, the
That's
delivery
what-
mechanism.
I really love that thought.
And also, how do we make conservation part of not only a farmer's bottom line, but our ag retailer's bottom line? And that's really what the next phase.
That's another strong thought, because it is part of the challenge is the folks are listening to
Right.
are not motivated
Right.
necessarily to care about conservation.
Or it's just,
Don't think about it. It's not on their radar.
right. I mean, you think of any farmer, most of the time they're working another job. They probably are raising families, and they maybe one year maybe have some excess funds. They want to improve the quality of their land, and so they're like, we'll put a wetland or saturated buffer in. The old way of conservation is they go talk to a local farm service, NRCS, and it would take them a year or more to get that plan approved. And then it would take another couple years to actually get the plan, to get the practice installed.
They need an easy button.
They needed an easy
And
button.
that's where Bash and Build came in.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
Bash and Build being a way for farm community to sign up for saturated buffers, for example, and then Polk County, in this case, made that easy and put a bunch of them together at once, making it more affordable to build an individual saturated buffer. And then we go from like 1 to 2 per year to 50 to 100.
Yes.
So bringing some things to scale that are good ideas, that's part of the transition.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that acceleration fund's really helping there.
Yeah, so the Conservation Acceleration Fund essentially is a funding mechanism that helps essentially stack private investment with public investment to further and accelerate the pace of water quality conservation, whether it be in capital projects or in different innovative thought leadership. But it's really just a funding mechanism. It's not a capital campaign. So we like to kind of stack those different dollars and get things on the ground a little bit quicker. I'm sure Melissa could explain it in a lot more technical term, but that is like the layperson's term of the conservation fund.
I don't know if there's a technical way to explain it. I think that's a good way to explain it, I guess. But from my perspective, it is just an amazing funding mechanism, because in my experience, and I've been in water resources for 15 years in nonprofit, municipality, consulting, and I had seen so many projects not be funded, great projects that would have made a huge difference in water quality. And it's just a way to fund those projects that weren't previously funded.
So you started to get into it a little bit, and each of you has a really unique perspective. Melissa, obviously, with your more technical background, and then Jen from a fundraising standpoint. Help talk through how this is a comprehensive solution. Like, I know that it is funding geared, but there's really a lot more going on behind the scenes that is removing red tape and alleviating some of those processes. Do you want to talk through that?
Yeah, I can start. So not only is it a funding mechanism, we kind of use that as like the leverage point, but we're also doing a lot of work in the public policy and regulation space. And so trying to really figure out what barriers are happening, whether it's in the ag landscape or whether it's in some of our state and federal offices landscape, and how we can come up with creative solutions with our partners to be able to get rid of some of that red tape. Obviously we've talked about conservation mechanisms delivery being from the 1930s. And so there's a lot of different ailments, I would say, that kind of help or do not help farmers when it comes to getting conservation on the ground. And so what that also turns into is maybe some funding restrictions from our public entities and public partners that maybe they can't fund a certain portion of a project, kind of what Melissa was saying. And so it also is another way for us to kind of navigate that landscape when it comes to regulations and red tape and barriers, and really trying to come up with a holistic solution when it comes to accelerating that pace of conservation.
And then from the more technical side, Melissa, I know you mentioned your experience in consulting and with different municipalities. Talk to us about what it looks like when you were in one of those situations. You're a water resources expert. You're looking at how to get high impact projects on the ground. What solutions is the Conservation Acceleration Fund providing, and how do you think it is changing the way we approach conservation from start to finish?
So prior to coming on with GOF, we we would approach projects would come to us, and we would follow all of the steps, all the protocols, checking in with DNR, checking in with the Corps of Engineers, checking all those boxes. And we'd run into hurdles. And sometimes, especially early in my career, I was like, oh, well, we just can't do that then. All right, now we got to completely go back to the drawing table, maybe not start again, but we would have to cut certain parts of the project out or just do something a little bit different. And now with GOF and like the backing of the team and Jen and Hannah's approach, and we question things more, which I really like that. Okay, so we get a no. Is it really a no? Can we?
It's never a no.
Let's just approach that. How about we come up with something different?
I wish people appreciated how nuanced water quality really is and took the time to be curious about it. I think that within the industry, we are having a lot of great conversations. We're having a lot of momentum. But as you get outside of that circle, there's just a lot of, 140 character soundbite type conversations that really cheapen the conversation and prevent us getting to the real answer. And so I think educating yourself, being curious, right? Like, instead of saying farmers just don't want to do this, like what John did, saying, okay, let me go have coffee with this person and say, why aren't you doing this? Right? Like, I'm curious. And so, being part of the solution, being curious, and having coffee with people to figure out what the barriers are, I think is really important. So just appreciating the nuances, that it isn't just black or white.
Yeah.
I mean, even as simple as what the definition of good water quality is so different depending on the usage, right? And most people don't even understand that. Drinking water quality is completely different than recreation, completely different, to all of those different things for habitat, things like that. And so just appreciating the nuance of it and being curious.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like this common theme in hearing both of you talk. It really comes down to people, right? And like a willingness to engage at a level that maybe wasn't happening before, right? So like when you guys get up in the morning, how do you approach those conversations, and what do you think is the key to success?
I think a couple keys that come to mind. I mean, conservationists have to be very proactive, have to be very positive. I love the name of your guys' podcast, Happy Disruptors. Like, I was like thinking about that coming in. I was like, yeah, that's kind of what it's about, right? Because we're overwhelmingly, and like, to be honest, like, stuff's a grind. Like, we're grinding every day. Like, we're working hard. But it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, if you just get projects on the ground, nobody's ever upset when you find a good project and you build a good project. Like, Hannah kind of mentioned that, like, when she works with me. Like, all that matters is, do we find good projects and do we get them to the finish line? Because that makes everyone happy. Because you can drive by it, whether you're a funder, a farmer, or conservation, you're like, I did that. Like, we did that. Yeah. That's making a difference. And so if you just focus on that and get up every morning, it's like, we're one step closer to getting projects on the ground. And then next thing you know, it's like, there's so many projects. You're like, oh, we got to prioritize. We should slow down a minute.
Yeah.
Never, don't slow down. Yeah. We'll just find more money.
Yeah.
I would say that for me, it's constantly how do we remove more barriers? How do we invest more in the John Swansons, of the world? How do we find those people? Yeah. And then I think what I've been thinking about a lot more lately is, John alluded, it's a grind, right? It's nuanced, as we've touched on, and we're not even getting into the science and the data, but it's nuanced. And there always seems to be some sort of obstacle or detour, and starting to look at that as just a fun part of the story instead of this is just going to make it a better project. This is just going to allow us to pave a way that's not been paved so we can do more. Just starting to look at those as obstacles and opportunities and make it a game, right? Yeah. How much can we get done?
Absolutely.
Life's a game.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think one thing that has come up this week in the sort of public dialogue is one, it's very clear that there is a lack of understanding of really what water quality means, how it's accomplished, all the different factors, and then also the lack of understanding of the nuance and interconnectedness of the issue. And so one of the things that we're trying to figure out is how do we at least get everyone to an understanding that we can have productive conversations, because it's really easy to be like, that's their problem. They need to figure it out and make these blanketed statements without understanding the nuances.
I've come so far in my understanding what GOF does, and I want the listener to understand that water quality is one of the main components of what GOF is doing, and it impacts everyone in, if you're in central Iowa, it has a huge impact here because we are downstream from a lot of runoff from water that starts in the northern part of our state and even Minnesota. So there are, and that gets into our water supply. So clean water is imperative to what we do. Stream bank mitigation is imperative to what we do. We can't lose what we have. And those are issues that I promise you 99% of our population doesn't think about twice. We need organizations like Great Outdoors to lead the way on these types of critical issues. You guys are doing a great job of getting the attention from the public sector and raising awareness and raising funds. The business community is on board because, as we all know, data centers are taking over in terms of real estate uses and water consumption. And the partnerships that you guys have created with data centers, it makes everybody feel good about the amount of water needed for a data center when we can reclaim and they can identify that water is such an important part of conservation in central Iowa, and they're funding certain projects, whether it has a direct benefit to their organization or it's just a general benefit because they need to give back a little bit. So I want people to walk away from this podcast understanding that Great Outdoors is doing something that is so necessary, but you probably haven't thought twice about in your lifetime, but you probably need to be more aware going forward.
Well, I don't know about you. I had so much fun reflecting back on these conversations. And as you know, we like to say here at the Great Outdoors Foundation and the Happy Disruptors podcast, we don't take ourselves seriously, but we take our work really seriously. So hopefully these snippets from our guests have given you some insight into the conversations that we've had over this season on water quality. And again, encourage you to go back and listen to those full-length episodes. Make sure to like and subscribe wherever you are listening and share this episode with someone who could benefit from learning more about water quality. And then tune in next week for our next Best of 2025 episodes. Thanks so much.